This week on Words and Numbers, Capitalism and Socialism.
Cocaine to coffee.
Finding vacant businesses.
And jobs numbers. Again.
All this and more coming up on Words and Numbers, a civil original production.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Catch us every week, twice, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 a.m. Eastern. What's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
I've got a fascinating story, and I've got notes all over the place, so I'm going to have to kind of give this to you in stream of consciousness. This concerns Howard Buffett, who is, of course, Warren Buffett's son, the Warren Buffett being the billionaire.
Is this the one about cocaine and coffee?
It is about cocaine and coffee. And
were you on one of those two things when you took all those crazy notes?
No, they involve Howard Buffett. But before I get to that, I want to remind our listeners of a story they've probably heard from Aesop's Fables. The story concerns a competition between the wind and the sun. So the wind and the sun are arguing about which is stronger, and they come up with a challenge. And the challenge was to make a passing traveler remove his cloak. And the wind goes first, and he blows as hard as he can. And the more he blows, the more the traveler grabs onto the cloak, holding it ever tighter. So the wind finally just gives up because he can't remove the cloak from the traveler. Then comes the sun's turn. What's the sun do? It just shines. It gets warm. The traveler takes his cloak off. And one of the morals to this story is that incentives matter. The wind gave the traveler an incentive to grab onto the cloak ever tighter. The sun gave the traveler an incentive to take off the cloak. And what's operational here is that it's, in the end, the traveler who decided what to do, not the sun or the wind. They simply handed over the incentives. All of this leads us to this story of Howard Buffett. And in this story, I'll cast Howard Buffett as the sun, and I will cast the U.S. government, specifically our war on drugs, as the wind. Colombia produces 3,000 tons of cocaine a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I was going to do the multiplication for the street value of that, but then quickly realized I was awash in zeros. The 3,000 tons of cocaine per year. The U.S. has spent since 2000 $10 billion just on that business in Colombia. So fighting the cocaine trafficking and the growing of the cocaine and all of that. So just Colombia itself.
So one drug in one small country.
One drug in one small country. Of course, it's a big market, but the U.S. has spent $10 billion. And what have we got for our $10 billion? 5 years ago, there were 100,000 families in Colombia growing cocaine 5 years ago. Today, there's 230,000, despite this $10 billion. Yeah, the number has doubled in just the past 5 years.
But I'm guessing, Ant, that when a foreign power goes after supply becomes difficult. And when supply becomes difficult, prices go up. And when prices go up, more people are encouraged to start farming.
Exactly. It just makes it more profitable to farm. And it's very much like the wind blowing on the traveler. The harder he blows, the more incentive the traveler has to grab onto the cloak. So too, the more money we spend fighting the drug business in Colombia, the more we restrict the amount of drugs coming in, the higher the price goes, and the more incentive the Colombian farmers have to grow the thing. So that's the wind side of the story. Now along comes Howard Buffett on the sun side of the story. And what is he doing? He spent this past year $170 million. He handed it over to cocaine farmers in exchange for them tearing up their cocaine crop and planting coffee instead. He gave them a profit incentive to switch crops from the one thing to the other thing. And the conditions are such that conditions that are good for growing cocaine are also good for growing coffee. And you can imagine that the machinery translates. So this is an easy switch. All you need is to give the incentive. He gives the incentive. And he has convinced 32,000 farmers to switch from cocaine to coffee. Now,
Wow.
just using his $170 million, reaping the reward of 32,000 farmers, what would it take to get all 230,000 farmers at that rate? It would cost $12 billion, or roughly what our government has spent trying to fight the cocaine farmers in Colombia ever since 1999.
I take your point completely, but it's a bit of a red herring too, right? You're never going to get the number down to zero, because
you're not going to.
The closer it gets to zero, the more incentive somebody has to say, now I'm going to be the only the coca leaf grower, and I will be the only cocaine producer.
Yeah, you're not going to get it to zero. In fact, I mean, this is the thing with any kind of public policy, whether it's cocaine or highway deaths or COVID or whatever it is, you're never going to get the number to zero. Right. The issue is, can you get it to a reasonable, tolerable level at reasonable cost? And what Howard has shown us is that, there's a way to do this. And I would point out here to those among us who see a problem and immediately turn to the government and say, well, you need the government to solve this. And those of us on the free market side say, wait a minute, take a deep breath. There could be market solutions to this. And they say, oh, no, the market isn't going to solve this because people are just selfish, and particularly the billionaires. Here we've got a billionaire using his own money to convince the cocaine farmers to switch to coffee.
And look, he might be selfish. He might be looking to make a massive profit here. I don't know. He's probably not doing it out of the goodness of his heart exclusively. But,
James, I would take solace in that. Because
I'm fine with it.
If he were doing it out of the goodness of his heart, that's wonderful, and we can all applaud him in this. And I don't know why he's doing it.
And it happens once.
Yeah, but if he's doing it out of a profit incentive, he's waking up at night thinking, how can I do this better?
And not only that, it's replicable. Other people can do it too, right? So, anytime you rely, and this is one of the real teachings of the American founders, anytime you rely on the goodness of a human being to occupy a place, be it an office or a position in a private corporation, you have made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
And it's just that simple. If men were angels, Madison said, no government would be necessary. But men are not angels.
I think people take what you just said is correct, and people misinterpret it to mean that there's no room for altruism in a free market system. And that's not at all what we're saying. Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Have as many altruistic people as you can fit in the room. But when they're done being as altruistic as they can be, if there's still more that needs to be done, it's the profit incentive that's going to get you there.
Profit incentive always does the heavy lifting. And I'll give you another example of, I guess, we'd call it an unintended consequence, but it fits in beautifully with your story. Anybody, and you and I, we were in high school in the 80s, just to kind of give people an idea of the time frame. And this applies, I will cheerfully admit, to me and not you. But when I smoked a lot of weed back in the 80s, it really wasn't that good. And then, it was weak. It was garbage. They called it ragweed a lot of times. Various other things that I won't say here because it'll make you angry. And then Ronald Reagan, whom I love, don't get me wrong, but everybody I love has some bonehead ideas, and Reagan was not immune. He started the war on drugs and the Just Say No campaign and Nixon started the war on drugs, but Reagan really ramped it up. And as a result, a lot of marijuana coming into the country, and other drugs too, were seized. And the drug producers started realizing they were taking a hell of a risk. And the bigger the shipment, the bigger the risk. So they started making it more potent so they could make the shipments smaller. And ain't that something? But these people, they know what they're doing. They've been in business for a long time. They know the risks. They can calculate the rewards.
Now, isn't that interesting? Because I did a study some years ago for the Mackinac Center in Michigan, and it was looking at differences in alcohol consumption across states, wherein the states had different laws about alcohol production and sales. So some of them were highly regulated, some of them were much more free market. And what I found in this study is, on average, the more regulated a state's markets were, the more the consumers consumed alcohol in the form of liquor as opposed to beer. And one of the arguments I gave is, look, the way to explain this is you can pack a lot more punch into a smaller container.
Mm-hmm. It's the same exact phenomenon. And you see it often enough.
Get Words and Numbers on Civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
I want to draw our attention, Ant, to something that you and I talk about quite a lot, and that's the relative strength behind the forces of capitalism and socialism in these United States. And, we would, I think, all stipulate that socialism has become more popular in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Would you have any problem stipulating to that?
I wouldn't argue against it, but I don't know any data one way or the other.
Well, but look, we've got Bernie Sanders and AOC, and people are actually in the halls of power claiming to be socialists.
Because, it was before my time, but back in the 50s, the McCarthy era, Congress actually had committees set up to ferret out socialists.
Yeah, and it turns out they didn't need to because nobody was going to vote for them anyway. But somehow, it became more acceptable, right? It's not that overwhelming scar across the forehead that it once was. And I found something from Gallup today that goes from 2010 to 2025. And it shows the positive ratings of capitalism and socialism by Americans over that period of time. And I can tell you that the headline was that capitalism is becoming less popular. And indeed it is. It's gone from roughly 61% to 54%. So down 7% over the last 15 years. That's not a tragic drop, but it's a meaningful one. Right, 7% is more than people might think. They might think it's 7 per 100, but it's more meaningful. It's a bigger shift than people might realize. The socialism side went up from 36 to 39.
Well, that's interesting. Up only 3%. 3% points.
3%.
Yeah.
So people are becoming less irked with socialism, but not nearly to the degree that they're becoming more irked by capitalism.
How interesting. Do you have an explanation for that?
I have a provisional explanation, and I think what they're really irritated with, and here we're always back to the same arguments with the same terminology. I don't think people conflate free markets and capitalism. We do not conflate free markets and capitalism. These are two completely different things. Now, they're not completely different. They're related but different. And in a capitalist society, once capitalists get in bed with government, you end up with crony capitalism. And I think that's what people truly despise. And as luck would have it, I also truly despise it, and I'm guessing you do too.
Oh, yeah. In fact, you don't just get it with capitalism. You get cronyism with socialism also. The problem is the cronyism.
That's correct. But I think the cronyism is literally woven into socialism. It can't be explicated.
I was going to say you can't have socialism without cronyism.
Yeah, but you can have free markets. We just consistently decide not to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what do I mean by this? I mean, everybody goes on and on and on about how we have market failures in healthcare because it's so damn expensive. There's no market failure in healthcare. That's government failure. It's one of, if not the most regulated market in the United States. What are the other regulated markets in the United States? Education, sky-high costs. Housing, sky-high costs. Take your pick. Wherever you see over-regulated markets, you see spiking costs. And then people blame capitalism.
And it's hard to do a what if. You and I can imagine what the healthcare market would look like if the government weren't involved. But that's because we've been looking at this for a long time. However, in the case of healthcare, there are some examples we can kind of point to.
I point to the same two every time.
Yeah. One is LASIK surgery and, cosmetic surgery in general. These are surgeries that largely aren't covered by insurance.
Yep.
And so consequently, you have a market without the insurance involved. You don't have the government involved nearly as much. And so you have much more of a free market. And the prices of those things have either remained steady or actually come down over time, but certainly not gone up nearly as much as healthcare in general.
Yeah,
and you've got the other example.
LASIK surgery is almost free compared to what it once was.
Right.
I mean, this was a remarkably expensive procedure that people paid out of pocket. I think last time I checked, it was under $1,000.
Yep.
And, look, I haven't checked it religiously, so correct me if I'm wrong out there in the comments, but it's just not expensive. If you really want LASIK surgery, you can go get it. The other, for my money, is veterinary care.
Yes, right.
Right? I mean,
and again, no insurance.
Well, you can buy insurance if you want, but it's not mandatory.
Right.
And if you want insurance on a pet, it doesn't cost that much. I have a dog who I absolutely adore. We don't have dog care insurance. When there's a problem, we go to the vet, we pay $65, and then we go home. And I can choose. It's easier for me to find a vet than it is for me to find a primary care physician.
Right.
Not only easier, and a lot easier.
And these aren't exactly the same product, but they're in the same universe.
They're in the neighborhood. Yeah, they're in the
One's
neighborhood.
government regulated, one's not. The government regulated price goes through the roof, the other one doesn't. Now, let me back off a minute, because you and I both used a term that we should probably put some flesh on. That's cronyism.
Yeah, sure.
Cronyism is a situation when you've got people who stand to benefit from government intervention, actively going to the government and encouraging the government to intervene.
It's essentially the buying of influence.
It's a buying of influence. A good case in point.
You and I have been having a Twitter disagreement with a gentleman who just can't fucking understand a damn thing. And I'm right. This is a stupid person. But he starts with a kernel of truth. And that's always where this sort of thing becomes dangerous. And we're going on with him about Robert F. Kennedy and vaccines and all of this nonsense. And he keeps saying, yeah, but the vaccine makers, they want to keep you sick, so you keep buying more vaccines. Now, that's idiotic. That's just idiotic. That's not how vaccines work. But he also says things like, and how did these big pharmaceutical companies get so much influence in the first place? And there he's got an honest question, right? That is a very good question to ask. How did they get this kind of influence? How did any industry or participant in any industry get this kind of influence ever? And the answer is always the same. They buy a seat at the table, and they buy it with campaign funding.
Yeah, and I think it's even more insidious than that. Once you get the government regulating your industry, then the government, the regulators, are not industry experts. They're politicians and bureaucrats. So they will turn to experts for the experts' advice in writing the regulation. And who do they turn to? The people who are being regulated. Those are the ones who have the expert opinions.
They turn to their lobbyists, because their lobbyists synthesize the expert opinion on the one hand and the political know-how on the other.
Mm-hmm. For example, in the case of minimum wage, Walmart lobbying the federal government to increase the minimum wage.
That's right.
Now,
in favor of, and people never, ever stop to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, think it through. If Walmart wanted to pay its workers more, it just pays its workers more.
Go ahead and pay them
Why
more.
does it need the government involved?
The answer is so obvious. It's so obvious that people can't even see it. And the obvious answer is that Walmart wants to cripple its competition, mom and pop stores who can't afford to pay more in minimum wage.
Yeah. Walmart was already, well, this case goes back to when we had the minimum wage, national minimum wage predominantly at $7.25 an hour. At that time, Walmart was paying more than the minimum wage. So to raise the minimum wage
for a higher
would
minimum
not,
wage.
Yeah, it would not have cost Walmart a penny, but would have
Not
put
a
a
dime.
bunch of its lower cost competitors out of business.
Yeah. Ain't that something?
Now, let me go back to the insurance case, because part of the reason insurance was so expensive leading up to the Affordable Care Act was because the government made it very difficult for health insurance companies to operate across state lines. Why was that so? The insurance companies themselves argued for legislation that would make it difficult for them to operate across state lines. Why? Because it would set up little fiefdoms, little local monopolies.
It's not that they didn't want to operate across state lines. It's that they didn't want anybody else to operate across state lines,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And this is always the answer, but at the risk of beating the same dead horse for another half hour.
But this is cronyism.
Yeah, it's absolutely cronyism. And I think that's what people have in mind when they say they hate capitalism.
Yeah, and I'm with people 100%, but just be careful. It's not a feature of capitalism. It's a feature of humans. And you'll get it in socialism as readily as you will in capitalism.
And this is why Ant and I almost never speak in glowing terms about capitalism, because it confuses things. We talk in glowing terms about free markets, right? And the freer the better. But this, of course, brings us to the foolishness of the week, because nothing.
I thought we were done with the episode here.
Nothing we just talked about constitutes the foolishness of the week, which is a little baffling. But Ant, I want to bring us to Portland, Oregon, a town that you and I have visited before, and
yeah, it's a nice town.
Had donuts in that were actually pretty good. Probably didn't live up to the hype, but pretty good. Their city council has approved a scheme, and you know when I use the word scheme, it's about to be bad news.
Well, when you say city council in Portland, I know it's going to be bad news.
They are now levying fines on owners of vacant commercial properties.
They're levying fines on owners of vacant commercial properties. Okay, so time out. I'm assuming here that nobody on the city council bothered to ask why the properties were vacant.
Well, it might have had something to do with previous city council rulings. I'm guessing that they're not going to be terribly interested in hearing that. But you would have to pay for properties vacant. And keep in mind, these are like little storefronts, right? For properties that are vacant for at least 6 months, but not a year, the owner would pay $500. At 1 year, the fee jumps to $1,000. After 2, it's $2,000. Then to $3,500 after 3 years, and $5,000 after 5 years. If the vacancy reaches 10 years, the fine jumps to $7,500, and then increases another $1,000 every year beyond that. And just to put some flesh on the bone, because people are probably saying, well, for most people, that's $500. What's the big deal? There was a building downtown, the Schwartz building, if you want to go look it up for yourself, which was vacant for 15 years before a coffee shop opened up. it would have been a $95,000 fine had the ordinance been in effect.
Wow.
$95,000 on a piece of real estate that definitionally is not supporting a business. I mean, it's not like people are fighting over the ability to get into the Schwartz building so they can open up a business. You can't lure somebody in because doing business in Portland is no can of corn, as our friends in the Midwest might say.
And Portland's problems is, I don't know if Portland has a homelessness problem. I know Seattle.
Portland absolutely has a homelessness problem.
Yeah. See, and this now becomes a thing, and I'm not saying anything about homeless people or what you should do about it. I'm simply pointing to the outcome, that if you have a bunch of homeless people there, customers are going to be less likely to show up, and that means that the businesses now go under, and now you've got a vacant storefront.
Yep, we have all kinds of businesses here in Tucson, Arizona that I won't go to after dark. Because the homeless are out like moths around a streetlight, and they cause a lot of problems. They're threatening, they're hostile. I'm not interested. And imagine the chilling effect that has on local business. But there's light at the end of this tunnel, Ant, because in their infinite wisdom, the Portland City Council has given business owners an out that they can take instead of paying the fine. And that is to display government-approved art in the windows of said empty businesses.
Government-approved art?
Yes, so they're going to have lots of art where there are no businesses.
Who is doing the government approving?
You can't make this shit up. This is so ridiculous that if I told you, hey, Ant, I got this great idea, you'd have me committed.
Oh, I agree with you. It's completely stupid. I'm just thinking through the unintended consequences in ways to make money here. For example, if you and I traveled to Portland once a year and with our complete abysmal lack of talent painted some modern art.
Yeah, I don't think
and displayed it in the businesses. In fact, we give them a cut. We'll pay them a little bit of money. No, actually, they would have to pay us a little bit of money because we're going to get fined $500. They pay us $100. We'll display their art there. They're net $400 better off. We're $100 better off. And we do that for X number of storefronts.
I don't think that math works at all, Ant. But no, I'm not doing any of that. No.
But at the end, what do you get? You don't get anything. You still have vacant storefronts. You have, at best, crappy art, but you still have the problem that caused the whole thing in the first place.
Oh, and I would submit that problem will continue to get worse because you're not doing anything serious to make it get better.
Yeah, you aren't addressing the issue. You're addressing the flummery around the issue.
I say this all the time. If you're not making things better, you're making them worse. So there you go. Go make them better or suffer the criticism. But this is just asinine. Just asinine.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, speaking of asinine, we've got some jobs numbers.
I'm sorry, my head's still stuck on the Portland thing. Jobs numbers. Do you know what's so strange? So we did an episode just a few weeks ago on the June jobs numbers when they got adjusted down by that huge amount. And then the nice lady who ran the Bureau of Labor Statistics paid for that with her job. Yeah, they fired her. So the numbers were the June jobs numbers. The initial estimate was that the economy added 147,000 jobs in June.
Which would be pretty good.
Yeah, which isn't bad. And then a month later, they did some more math and they discovered, the economy didn't add 147,000. It added 14,000.
Now that sucks.
And she gets fired. Trump says they're making up the numbers, the whole thing. And
he installs somebody new so we can expect that the numbers are now officially not made up.
Right. And what's the latest update still for June? 13,000 loss.
as
they
they
got
say,
worse.
The hits just keep on coming. Just keep on coming. And let's, well, go ahead. If you've got a technical point, go ahead, because I've got political points.
I want to just look at the numbers for a moment. BLS goes through these 3 rounds of revisions as they get more and more information. It's the 3rd round that basically you can say, okay, this is the right number. And I've got the jobs numbers going back to January and into last year. November, December, last year. November, the economy added 261,000. December added 323,000. Now comes January. Now we take a hit, but it's still not that bad. We add 100,000, 111,000 in January, 102,000 in February, 120,000 in March, 158,000 in April. And what happened in April? The tariffs kicked in.
Yeah.
And in May, we added 19,000. In June, we lost 13,000. So far, it looks like we were adding 79,000 in July and 22,000 in August. So what happened was, when those tariffs hit, the jobs numbers that were already down by about half compared to what they were in 2024, the job numbers got cut by a factor of 10.
Imagine that.
They're 1/10 what they were.
If only two guys with a podcast could have predicted exactly this outcome.
Now, people are going to say...
It was us and we did. Yes.
People are going to say, well, this is Trump derangement syndrome. This has nothing to do with Trump looking at the numbers. I'm just reporting what I'm telling you. I'm not saying it has to do with Trump. I am saying it has to do with the tariffs. Now, whether Trump imposed the tariffs or if Biden had imposed the tariffs, it would have had the same effect.
Stop making this easier for these people in office right now. It has everything to do with Donald Trump. He came into office saying, I'm going to implement tariffs. And people who knew better said, now, Donald, if you implement tariffs, the following terrible things will happen. Oh, and by the way, you probably don't have the authority, be it legislative or constitutional, to have these tariffs in the first place.
More on that in a moment.
More on that in a moment. And he said, fuck all you guys. I'm going to have these tariffs. And then we did. And exactly what sensible people predicted would happen, happened. And come to find out, federal judges are lining up in agreement that the legislation he used to pass the tariffs is incorrect. Why? Because it doesn't use the word tariff. The entire piece of legislation does not include the word tariff, nor does it include the word tax or revenue or any of the words that you could say really means tariff. And then, if you look at the Constitution, God help us all, we should do that, all taxing power belongs to Congress. Period. And tariffs are a tax. Period. So, no matter how you slice this, it's the Trump administration's fault. They knew better, and they said, we don't care what you say, we're doing it anyway. Because, as Trump said just very recently, I'm the president of the United States. I could do whatever I want. And then, the minute this jobs number hit, you've got Besant out there saying, and Trump as well, saying, you're really going to have to wait a year for our policies to bear fruit. All this from the very people who told us that all we have to do is implement these policies and America will be wealthy immediately. Well, which is it? Is America going to be wealthy immediately? Because if so, that didn't happen. Do we have to wait a year? Well, why would another year of this make any difference at all, outside of a bigger, worse difference? And there you go.
Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. I gotta underline here because I know people are just itching to say Trump derangement syndrome. The fact is that, again, it doesn't matter who's in office. This policy would yield the same outcome. We all knew this. Economists know how this works. And we warned this kind of policy is going to give you this effect. And lo and behold, it has given this effect. Now, somebody might say, give the other side its due. How do you know it was the tariffs that did this? It could have been something else going on in the economy.
Nope.
Well, I can point to something. I've been, for the past 18 months, 2 years, in my new position, I give summaries to people about economic forecasts. And I show not just a suite of forecasts, 40 to 50 forecasters, and I'll average them out and say, okay, you have the crazy people on this side balanced with the crazy people on this side. The average looks like this. This is what you can expect. And I go a step further. I say, based on what I'm seeing when I look at these forecasters, I can tell you not just what to expect, but I can tell you what the pessimists see and what the optimists see. And for the past 2 years, every single time I gave this talk, I would point to the pessimists and I would say, look at the pessimists. Even the pessimists aren't forecasting recession. Month after month after month after month, it's the same thing. The pessimists never forecasting recession until February.
Mm-hmm.
In February, when the president first started talking about tariffs, all of a sudden, the pessimists were forecasting recession. And then as he started to implement them in March and got serious about them in April, the pessimists just got more pessimistic. I mean, down to forecasting recessions like we haven't seen since the 1930s. I could see it happen week by week in response to the press that was coming out of the White House. So I can tell you, it is exactly that. It is the tariff policy that's driving what we're seeing.
And Ant, I got to get into this Trump derangement syndrome business. You've brought it up, I think, twice, maybe 3 times now. And we do get this criticism more often than you might think, because there is a cadre of people out there who will take any criticism of Donald Trump so personally that you must be deranged in order to have even made it. And I would submit this. Where were the people telling us that we had Biden derangement syndrome when we criticized his policies week after week after week for 4 solid years? Never heard it once. Never, not once. But somehow, for a certain sizable enough segment of our population, Donald Trump represents a religious, a messianic figure. And I would say if anyone has Trump derangement syndrome, it's them. He is a politician. He is not worthy of your respect. He does not do good things. Write him off the same way you wrote off Biden and Obama and Clinton and both Bushes.
Let me be easier here, because I don't want to make this personal about the president. Rather, I would say anybody who supports him should listen carefully to what we're saying here, because he's only 9 months into his term. He could end this term as a great president. There's ways to do this. And what we're pointing out are the ways not to do it. Well, he's got plenty of time in front of him. He's already exercised authority he doesn't have, strictly speaking. Use that to do some good.
Absent some sort of massive global convulsion that's not of his making, right? That's an important caveat. he can't be a great president, right? Great presidents only occur, they only come around when things are so grim and you could pull a people out of that kind of hole, right? This is why we think of in the 20th century, there are only two great presidents in the 20th century, and they were FDR and Reagan. They share almost nothing politically, right? Their programs were radically different, but it was the times that made them great. It was Roosevelt in World War II, and we can say whatever we're going to say about the Great Depression, but nonetheless. And it was Reagan with the Cold War. You needed those things. Bill Clinton lamented, after having two relatively successful terms, that there was no real defining moment for him. And I don't want this to sound like, I've said this before, and people give me the grace to think about it the way I mean it, not the way they might want to hear it. But how do you think Bill Clinton felt on 9/11?
My guess is he was thankful he wasn't in office.
No, I don't think that at all.
Really?
No, I think he was sitting there saying, if that had happened on my watch, I would have been known as a great president. Because I would have done A, B, C. And I remember the day after it happened, or maybe it was maybe a little more than that. I was in New York. I lived in New York at the time. And people in New York, it's hard to explain to people not in New York how hard New Yorkers took this. And I was upstate, not even in the city. And they said, what do you think's going to happen? And I said, well, President Bush, George W., could come out of this as being widely understood to be one of the greatest presidents of all time. And people went, do you really think that's going to happen? I went, oh, no, I don't think that's going to happen at all. But it could, in a way that nothing on Clinton's watch would have yielded that outcome. He didn't have the opportunity, right? So Trump, if he is going to be remembered as a great president, has to seize upon something that's not his fault. I don't know what it's going to be. It could have been the debt, but he's just running it up worse and faster. So it's not going to be that. He seems to think that this immigration business is going to work. It's just making everybody angry. In the end, it's going to turn out to be a bit of a nothing burger. And look, people don't understand. He is deporting far fewer people than Barack Obama ever did. So if you hate Donald Trump for deporting people, you do also hate Barack Obama? Because you have to. And if you don't, you're a hypocrite. Now he's blowing up boats as they leave Venezuela and might or might not be in international waters. But even if they were, they weren't heading to the United States anyway. What the hell is that all about? So, look, nothing's adding up here, right? He needs a rational plan that addresses real problems. But he has crazy plans that make more problems. And tariffs, chief among them.
You know, for years, when we've talked many times about the debt, and people have taken me aside after the talk and said, seriously, what can we do about this? And time and again, I have said, what we need is someone to come along who's going to kick politics in the teeth and do what needs to be done. And,
could have been.
Trump
could have been.
Trump has given us half of that. He successfully kicked politics in the teeth. And, you know, I hope that in his remaining 3.5 years, he turns it around. He could.
I will bet.
He could, in the same way Bush could have become a great president.
Hear me when I say this. I will bet any amount of money anybody wants to bet that the debt will be higher when he leaves office than when he came into office. Any amount. Up to and including the value of my house. This is how certain I am that he will not make a lick of difference in a positive way with the debt. And he could have. He was, in our lifetime, he was the guy who really could have done that. And he just chose not to. He'll blame it on COVID. right? And then he'll blame it on something else later, probably Supreme Court justices after they smack down these idiotic tariffs.
And what worries me is the next guy who comes along, and I don't think it's going to be a Republican, the next guy who comes along would similarly have the ability, based on the groundwork that Trump has laid, to kick politics in the teeth and do what needs to be done. And I'm desperately afraid that the next guy is going to kick politics in the teeth and try and undo plus what Trump has done. And then we just get this pendulum going back and forth with a wider arc than before.
Right. What's going to happen from here on out until cooler heads finally prevail, which might mean forever, right? Cooler heads may never prevail again. But what's going to happen is every time we have a partisan switch at the level of the presidency, the first thing the new president is going to do is going to walk into the office and sign a raft of executive orders undoing all the executive orders of the clown who came before him. And we're just going to keep doing this now. We should not be governing by executive order. I understand why we might need them under rare circumstances. But legislation belongs in the hands of Congress. And if Congress refuses to legislate, there's not much you can do about it.
And the more I think about it, James, the more I end up with that conclusion that the ultimate problem here is Congress. Congress has abrogated its authority, is asleep at the wheel and has been for decades.
Decades. That's right. They can't wait to cede more authority to the executive branch because that means that they're not accountable to it.
Right.
And how is it that 98% or whatever the absurdly high number is of our representatives get reelected? If they're so bad and we hate them so much, well, what the hell? It turns out we're all okay with it. How do I know? Well, look at the reelection rate. We're all literally okay with it.
This conversation reminds me when I was a kid and saw Star Wars for the first time. And at one point in Star Wars, they say something about the Emperor has dissolved the Senate. And they say, well, how will the government keep control and all this stuff? And I'm thinking, how can the leader just dissolve the Senate? I said, well, it's fiction. And I look around today, I can see how that can happen. You get a Senate, you get a Congress that does nothing, to the point that the people say, well, yeah, go ahead and dissolve it. It hasn't done anything for 50 years.
And I'm just going to point out here that the uber sci-fi dorks who listen to us, largely because of you, they need to send you hate mail about what you just said.
Why?
Because that didn't happen in Star Wars, but It
did. All right. All of you, get on your keyboards and send James hate mail because we all know that it did happen.
Oh, it happened, just not in the movie you said it happened in.
Episode 4, A New Hope.
Okay.
Oh, this is great. If you are not watching the video, if you're listening to our voices right now, James his eyes all went squirrely because he doesn't know what Episode 4, A New Hope is.
I know what Episode 4 is. That's Star Wars. Star Wars 1. There are only 3 Star Wars movies. Star Wars.
Right. 4, 5, and 6.
The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. That's it. And what you're talking about is, I'm almost positive, in the prequels.
No, couldn't be. I didn't even watch the prequels. It's Disney nonsense.
All right. Well, we'll find out. Either way, we're both getting hate mail on this one.
I will bet you a cigar.
But I can't give you a cigar. You'll just vomit.
If you win, I'll send you a cigar. If I win, you won't send me one.
If you win, I will send you a couple of little containers of uber hot sauce from right here in Arizona.
Superb.
There we go. So on that happy note, Ant.
Well, we need to ask the question, what should we do? Because we've talked about things in theory. We've talked about the facts, but what should one's response be? And I think
one of the very first things we should do is lean on Congress to do its constitutional duty.
Yeah, I think so. And people are going to say, well, what does that mean? You can write your congressman. It sounds stupid, but it actually does have an effect. And you know why? Because relatively few people do it.
Follow your congressman on Twitter and tweet at them. They pay attention. Yeah. There is somebody in their office whose job it is to keep a running tally of positive and negative mentions. When they
So tell your congressman to wake up and do his job.
Wake up and do his job. And notice, this is not a partisan thing. Not partisan at all.
And not partisan is really important, because I want to draw this back to Civil's platform of human respect. That one of the great ways you can move all of this forward is by employing human respect specifically to the people around you who disagree with you. So if you're a Trump supporter, go find someone who isn't. If you aren't a Trump supporter, go find someone who is, and have a reasonable conversation with them. Both, whether you're for Trump or against him, we both have the same problem, which is a Congress that isn't and hasn't been doing its job.
And here's a crazy thought.
How can we work together?
Stop using the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. Just stop using it. It's insulting. If I am speaking out against something the most powerful politician in the United States has done, I am not deranged. I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. I would like to have a conversation about it if and only if people on the other side of the issue can be civil. They also have to care about evidence, because evidence matters. And you can't just wipe it away because you don't like it, the way Trump himself did with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You have to take these things seriously. And if you can do those things, you can have an honest and honorable conversation with somebody you disagree with. If you can't do those things, you can't. It's really that simple.
You might as well just cut it there.
I think everything you just said, Ant, kind of, maybe it's everything I just said, is kind of the same as telling people to be nice to each other. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. Look, it's really, really hard. And I fail at it.
You're going a step further.
I fail at it every day.
You're going a step further. You're asking people to be nice to people they don't want to be nice to.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I freely admit that I fail every day when I try to be nice to people. But
I can attest to that.
Go fuck yourself. But the important part is that I keep trying, right? Because I know how important it is. So you keep at it, and you keep at it, and you keep at it, and it's an ideal that you hold. And you may never actually reach the height of the ideal, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. Anyway.
Yeah, sometimes pushing toward it is important.
It's more important that I'm better today than I was yesterday than if I were to be perfect today. Anyway, I'll catch you next time, Ant. We got a couple of days off here, and until then, have a great life. See you in a little bit.
See you next time, James. Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.